On today's Ask Zach, I'm going to talk about my very first touring experience. Let's just say it was less than glamorous. Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ask Zach. You've probably all at some point fantasized about being out on the road and, being gone for weeks at a time and, being with your fellow musicians and riding on nice buses and sleeping in a bunk and having nice catering and playing nice venues and meeting wonderful people and just having amazing experiences. Well, those things can happen, but most everyone pays their dues and has some pretty rough touring experiences in the beginning. So I'm going to talk about my first touring experience, which was a 4-week long trip that I was away from home for the first time, and it was a disaster, and also it was amazing, and it was a great learning experience for me. So I'm going to talk about all those things. I'm also going to, talk about the gear that I had back then. So this is in 1996, and we're gonna do it's gonna be an Ask Zach story time, and we're just gonna have fun. All right, a quick pause for the cause. First off, I need to say that I have a merch site up again. So of course, to any of you that had problems with Spring over the last 8 months or so, I apologize. I hope at this point you've canceled your order. I'm with a new merch provider called Fourth Wall, and they came highly recommended by Keith Williams of 5 Watt World. And so I've already uploaded a number of designs. So of course you can get the amp schematic shirt. I even had an amp schematic coffee mug made that's gigantic. So, and of course It's a Sickness and some other things. So please check that out. There's a link in the description. And also there's stuff even, below the screen because it's linked up with YouTube. All right, then I just need to say thank you for everyone that supported me, who's put money in the tip jar, and a special thanks to my Patreon members. And if you want to find out about Patreon, there's a link in the description. All right, so I feel like I need to preface this story a little bit and just say, of course, I had grown up playing in church and then playing in the dance halls of Texas and bars and things of that sort. And then I moved up to Nashville. Now, and every time that I had done a show, I had driven in my own vehicle, carried my equipment, played the gig and then went home. There was the rare times when someone would rent a van and we would drive up to play a gig and maybe spend the night at a hotel, or maybe we'd all come back in the van that night, get back at 4 a.m. or whatever. But that was kind of my traveling experience. Then I need to tell you kind of, where I was at kind of physically, mentally and such. So it was 1996 and it was May, and I had just graduated from college, from Belmont University. And I didn't have a job. I had no prospects for a job. And I was just a big idiot. So I had a job offer. A friend of mine named Johnny Rose, who's a wonderful guy, and he had worked for MCA and Capitol and DreamWorks. And he had gotten me a job offer from Capitol Records. And it would have been like an entry-level sales position. It would have been, a desk job, and would have been, an assistant. And, it would have been bad entry-level pay, but it would have been stable and a job, and it would have been a good thing. But I turned it down because I had to play music. I was, just eat up, and I had to be playing. Also, I had a very close family member, my cousin Lee, passed away in a car accident. And he was about the same age as I was. And he and I had the same kind of car. We both had Bronco 2s, Ford Bronco 2s. And I had been in a bad accident where my car was totaled, but I was fine. And then a couple months later, he was in a bad car accident and he passed away. And so I had survivor's guilt because he was just an amazing person and he was an amazing student. And I looked up to him. He graduated summa cum laude and, con mucho gusto, all that stuff. And he was just, one of my, closest, family members. And it really hit me hard when he passed away. So also, I had been living on campus, the whole time I had been at Belmont. And so I didn't have a place to live at graduation. And so I had a friend of mine that he said, well, I'm getting an apartment out in Bellevue, which Bellevue is kind of on the west side of Nashville. And he said, yeah, we're getting a 2-bedroom place and there's going to be 3 of us there. If you pay extra, then you can have one of the bedrooms to yourself. In other words, you don't have to share a room. So I think I paid like $25 extra. And so I graduated. My parents helped me move out there, and me moving consisted of a bookshelf, a record collection, a record player, 2 twin reverbs, a Telecaster, a Strat, and a pedal board, and an acoustic or 2. And those were all my earthly possessions. And my parents, of course, saw that I didn't even have a bed, because, of course, they provided a bed for me on campus. And I probably could have slept on the 2 twin reverbs, but my parents were kind enough to go buy me a bed. And so that's where I was. So I was out in Bellevue with 2 other guys in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had no money. I had no prospects for a job, had no gig. I was in this weird funk because of my cousin's passing. And now as a parent, I think about if the roles were reversed and I was one of my parents, I would have been freaking out. If I had a son that graduated college and he didn't have a job and wasn't looking for a job and was just, but I guess they knew that I was going to have to figure it out. And that's what I did. So I was, graduated and living in this apartment for a grand total of about a week when I got this phone call. So a buddy of mine named Jeff, who's a drummer that I'd played on some demo sessions, like some songwriter demos in Nashville, he called me and he said, Zach, my wife and I have been, performing on cruise ships for a while and we're tired of it. And we really want to give the country music thing a try. Now you have to remember, this is May of 1996. Country music is gigantic, and all the record labels are just, have huge rosters. There's a bunch of labels. All the publishing companies have tons of songwriters. There's a lot of work going on. So I was like, sure. And he said, well, to kind of get started, we're going to do 4 weeks out on the road and go play some clubs and stuff and kind of get the band together and then try to do more. I was like, great. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, I've got a job. Now he told me what the money was and it was terrible. And it amounted to about $50 a day. And of course, we were going to be gone for 4 weeks. But I was going to make some money. And otherwise, I was going to have to go to Applebee's or Chili's or someplace like that and start, start waiting tables, which I've done that before also. All work is honorable. So I said yes. And I said, when do we leave? And this was Saturday night. So Saturday night, he says, we're leaving first thing Monday morning. And we're going to Rawlings, Wyoming, which is a 20-hour drive. We're going to leave Monday morning. And we're going to get there on Tuesday, and then we're going to play that night for 4 hours. I'm like, whoa. So I'm going to play with a drummer that I've played on some demos with. And I'm going to play with his wife, who I've never met, and then a bass player and a keyboard player that I've never met. And we've never had a rehearsal. And we're just going to go out there and we're going to go play for 4 hours. Sounds like insanity, which is what it was. So we loaded up on Monday morning, and they had a little minivan with a trailer, and they had a little PA system, and we all loaded in our, the band gear, and I'll talk about my gear later. And we load up and we start driving, and it's over a 20-hour drive from Nashville to Rawlins, Wyoming. And then of course you have stops, and of course we don't stop to sleep or anything like that. We just deadhead it, all the way to Rawlins. And we get there Tuesday afternoon, and we set up the PA and our band gear, and we're all wiped out. And we sound check, kind of go over kind of a couple of songs just to make sure that we have a couple that we can play. And we all go to our rooms, which we had 2 rooms. So of course the husband and wife have a room, and then the other room is the bass player, the keyboard player, and I. And of course the hotel room only has 2 beds, so they have to bring out, a fold out bed, hideaway. And yeah, and the hotel was right next, it was kind of a motel, and it was right next to the old bar. And you could tell it had been built in the 70s, and it had kind of like clown vomit shag carpet. And that, again, this is in 1996. It hadn't been renovated in at least 20 years. And there was an old ice machine, which I'll talk more about later, that will become important. And yeah, so we got a quick bite to eat, and then we played. So we were very fortunate. We were blessed in that there was nobody there, not a soul. So here we are, and we're going to start our first song, and there's nobody there. So we start off. We've never really rehearsed or anything, so we only know about 10 songs. And so to stretch things out, we start every set with me doing kind of a blues thing, so it'd be... that kind of thing. And then we do a couple of songs that we had worked through. And again, she's, this is the mid-90s, so she's doing like Bonnie Raitt, Shania Twain, Leanne Rimes, Patti Loveless, doing a lot of, what we unfortunately called, country chick tunes, which is not very appropriate at this point, respectful. And then about mid-set, I would do Working Man Blues as an instrumental. And I'd play, which basically was just me soloing, for 2 or 3 minutes. And let's talk about the players at this point. So, of course, the singer was not playing an instrument. Of course, you had the husband that played drums, who was a good drummer. You had the bass player that was good, but he was a lot older than the rest of us. He had long gray hair and a handlebar mustache, and he wore all black leather. He had black leather chaps, black leather boots, black leather cowboy hat, black leather vest. I mean, he was all in black leather. And then, to make the contrast even greater, we had a keyboard player that had gone to a religious school, and he knew only religious music. He didn't know any country music or pop music at all, hardly at all. He also did not know how to improvise or solo. So basically all he could do was he could kind of comp some chords. He was like not even a rhythm guitar player. So he didn't really learn any parts. For him, learning the song was learning the chords to it and being able to just play some chords while everything else was going on. So not a whole lot of help. Yeah. So we got through the first night, again, playing a lot of instrumentals and playing the same tunes over and over again. The next day, we learn a bunch of songs, which, again, this is pre-internet and iPhones and all that stuff, which meant basically we were limited to what we had CDs or cassettes of and stuff. So the singer had a boom box and she had some CDs, and so she had like the Shania Twain record and some other things, and so we would sit down as a band and listen to songs, and then we would figure them out, and then we would rehearse. And that's how we did it. And then if we screwed up, if we were doing the song wrong, sometimes we'd have to put our instruments down and we'd sit back down with the boom box, and we would work on the songs. The third night, there started being a few more people. And there was this one guy that had two girls with him, and they were really drunk. And we were kind of watching them the whole night. Well, the next morning we find out that they were in a horrible, drunk driving accident, which was awful. And it meant that no one was there the next night. So not even 5 people. I mean, again, it was no one at the Golden Spike in Rawlins, Wyoming. So we continue to learn songs and just kind of do our best. So let me pause and talk about, just kind of the living conditions. Now, of course, like I said, we were 3 to a room, and the all leather clad bass player was a chain smoker. And he would go on the balcony with the door open, and we'd have to tell him over and over and over again to please close the door when he smoked. We had no kitchen facilities. There was no little mini fridge or anything. And we had no money. We couldn't afford to eat McDonald's or Subway. So we all bought ice chests. And we would go to the funky ice machine there in the hotel, and we'd fill up our ice chests with ice and replenish it and drain water out of it. And we went to the grocery store and we bought the cheapest milk, the cheapest cereal. We bought generic brand cereal or stuff that was like in a bag instead of a box. No fancy graphics, and that for us because we couldn't afford it. And then we would get the cheapest white bread, like sometimes the day old or day or two old, loaf of bread that was 50 cents instead of 99 cents. And then we'd get some flat meat, like some bologna or something, nothing cut from the deli. We were getting just whatever cheap, sandwich meat we could find. And the same, maybe some American cheese, but it wasn't Kraft. We couldn't afford it. So that was what we ate. So we ate basically cheap sandwiches and cereal and milk. And that was kind of what we lived on. And once a week, we would splurge and we would go to a Pizza Hut, because that was about one of the cheaper places you could eat at that point. Because they had this lunch thing. It was a personal pan pizza, and it was like $5.99, and you got this little pizza that was in its own little cast iron, pan, and maybe it was one topping, and you got a drink, and that's what we did. That was our idea of splurging. Whoops. And now it's at this point I need to say some positive things about this experience, because it sounds kind of like a lot of woe is me. Well, it wasn't, because in this, I'm learning how to play guitar a lot. I'm learning a lot about playing the guitar, because I'm having to cover all the intros and outros and solos. I'm having to learn lots and lots of parts, and I'm soloing a lot to the point that I'm getting tired of my solos. I'm getting tired of my licks and tricks that I used to be very happy with. But now I'm playing 4 or 5 hours a night, 6 nights a week. And so I'm having to come up with new, ideas. And I'm getting more adventuresome in my soloing. I'm taking chances, because who cares? We're playing in a bar in Rawlins, Wyoming. Let's take a chance. What's the worst that can happen? The guys in the band laugh at me because there's hardly anybody there. So, yeah, I'm learning a lot. And also, I'm just learning about sandbox politics and how to get along with other people, how to be stuck with other people all the time, how to never be alone. I mean, and that was hard for me because I'm an introvert and I really, alone time's really important to me. So, yeah, I learned some really important things. So, we finished that first week in Rawlins, Wyoming, playing at the Golden Spike. And then we drove down to Gallup, New Mexico. And there we were playing at a mall that had like a bar slash Mexican restaurant that we played at. And they gave us a discount. And again, we still couldn't afford to eat there all the time, but we ate once at the restaurant. And the singer, she had never had New Mexico Mexican food, and she got something with hatch green chilies on it, and it ended up making her miserable until she let out the most god awful flatulent during the middle of a gig, and just about cleared the stage. But afterwards, she was okay. Also, another incident with the singer was. Shania Twain was really big at that point, and which kind of meant also kind of pushing the kind of sensual side of things as far as the way you dressed. And she decided to get a sheer top and wear a black brassiere underneath it. And she was, wearing that one night in the bar in Gallup, New Mexico. And I'm playing and I'm behind her because she's, of course, she's further forward and I'm back here, so I can't see anything. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up and he's talking to her and he's requesting a song, and then he's just kind of babbling on. And I'm wondering what's going on. And then all of a sudden, you see her kind of reach down in her top, and all of a sudden you realize he was up there because part of her anatomy had come out of the bra, and she was putting on a show and she didn't know it. And so that guy was coming up for a closer look. And I felt bad for her, but also it was kind of funny. But yeah, those were the kind of things, that happened. And so we did 2 solid weeks at this place in Gallup, New Mexico. I got offered peyote and I turned it down. I said it was band rules, even though I was lying. I just wasn't, I wasn't up for that. And then we drove back to Wyoming, but this time we went to Green River, Wyoming. I guess that's a CCR tune. And we were so excited to stay there because instead of having 2 hotel rooms, we were going to have a band house that had a kitchen and had bedrooms. And so we were really excited about that, especially after 3 weeks of, the 3 guys, we'd been sharing a room the whole time. So we got to the band house and it was an old trailer, and it did have 4 bedrooms though. It had 1 bedroom in the back, which of course was bigger and the couple took. And then there were these 3 tiny bedrooms that were, they're big enough for a little single bed, and that's it, and big enough for you to get in the room. So, it was glorified closets with a bed in it. But I was grateful for it. I was very grateful for it. And we had a kitchen that had a big hole in the floor that you could, you see the outside, you could see the dirt of the floor underneath it, and, air would just come rushing in. But I went to the store and I bought like some actual, I couldn't afford a steak, but I bought some little minute steaks for $2.99 and some bread and some cheese. And I had some little minute steak sandwiches. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. So we played there and, we did the week and we came back, and then we continued to have more misadventures, where we'd go down and play a speedway down in Georgia, where we were supposed to be housed and fed, and housed ended up we were staying in someone's house with them there. And as far as fed, we were fed cold barbecue sandwiches, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then we started playing at this old dance hall in Grenada, Mississippi. Okay, so this is south, way south of Memphis. And it was a gigantic room. We never, ever even approached, filling it a fourth of the way. It was just this gigantic room. And on each side of the stage, next to the PA speakers, it had these gigantic fans that were about 8 feet tall. And, we played there. And we started doing kind of the Grenada thing where we would just play there, we would play there like 3 nights in a row. And so we would go back to Nashville, and then we would leave like on Thursday, and we'd go play Thursday, Friday, Saturday down in Grenada. And at this point, everyone is getting tired of the gig. No one's really talking about it, but it's just the money's terrible. The experience is like, again, I can now look back and say I learned a lot, but it just wasn't fun, and the money wasn't really good, and we're all kind of getting tired. So we ended up having another gig in Grenada, Mississippi. And before we left, the band leader, the couple, their minivan that we always drove in, it broke down. And so we had to go in our individual cars down there. And, so of course we had to load up the PA and the gear into, these other vehicles and such. And it was just, kind of a rough experience. We drove down there, again, very little audience. No one was coming out to see us. I think the name of the band was, I'm not going to say her name. It was her name and then Hearts of Fire. And I remember seeing, the name of the band, on those little, signs with the little plastic letters and the letters and the arrow. And it was just, hilarious. And so on this last time to Grenada, we played the gig and just nobody talked. No one laughed. No one joked. We all just kind of went through the motions. And then Saturday night, we loaded up the stuff. Sunday morning, we checked out of the hotel and we drove back to Nashville, and we all unloaded our stuff or got our stuff out, and we didn't even say goodbye to each other. We all just left, and we never talked again. There was never like the band's broken up. There's never like we're not, there was no conversation. And I have not spoken with any of those people since the summer of 1996. Everyone knew that the gig was over. Everyone just knew. And so no one cared. And everyone was just done. Everyone was checked out. Whew. So that was a crazy experience. But I'm very grateful for how it pushed me musically, and also it gave me just a greater appreciation of everything that I've gotten to do before and since. So let's talk about gear for a minute. So at that time, I had 2 twin reverbs. I had a 1969 twin reverb that was stock, and then I had another twin reverb that was a 79 that had been black-faced as far as electronically, and then also it had a 15-inch JBL D130 in it with and they had put a soft dome on it. They'd taken off the aluminum dome off the speaker. I had an ESP telly that was pink with white binding that had a Warmoth neck on it, and it had a B-bender on it and Seymour Duncan pickups, and it had the middle pickup. And then I had a 57 reissue Strat that was black, and that guitar unfortunately got stolen from me. And that was a really good guitar. And then I had an Ovation Custom Legend 12-string that I strung up with only 6 strings because it was the only acoustic that I had that had a good pickup. Because I also had my Martin D28, but it didn't have a good pickup in it at the time. And I had a pedal board that had a Boss compressor, an original vintage TS-808, an Ernie Ball volume pedal, and a Boss Dimension chorus, and 2 Boss delay pedals, one set to long and one set to a slapback. And that was my rig. And one of the really funny things that happened was when we went out, of course, I told you that, I got the call for the gig Saturday night, and then we left on Monday, first thing Monday morning. Well, guess what? I didn't have any spare strings. And so I only had the strings that were on the guitars. And while we were out there on the road, there were no music stores that were open on Sunday at that point. Again, that's 1996. There was no music stores open. So I had to go find a kind of a head shop, record store, guitar shop in Rawlins, Wyoming, that ended up having like a couple sets of strings, and they were like $15 each. And I remember buying 2 sets of Ernie Ball 5150 strings. So Eddie Van Halen licensed the 5150 name to Ernie Ball for a while, and they made these string sets that had the 5150 graphics, and there was a pure nickel set that was like 9 through 40 or something like that, and had a 15 for a G string. And I'd been using D'Addario 9.5 strings, but I got those because that was the closest thing I could find. And I also bought some alcohol wipes, like you'd use if you were going to give yourself an injection. And I would wipe down the strings in between every single set because I was trying to make those strings last as long as I could, because we were never anywhere near a real music store, anywhere near a big city where I could buy some more strings. So I wasn't able to buy strings until we got back to Nashville. And so when we got back to Nashville, I bought a whole box of D'Addario 9.5 through 44 sets so that I wouldn't be in that situation again. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and me talking about my crazy tour experience. I apologize for my telly being half naked. I've been swapping pickups on it and just been also messing with pickup height and stuff. And I thought this guitar actually looked pretty cool without the pick guard on it. So it's kind of fun, except for the old gap there. So, and you can see that at some point someone was going to put a third pickup, and they put some dye on there that I couldn't even sand all of it off when we were doing the body. But anyway, all right, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.